It's hard to imagine that the Peugeot 305 was manufactured until 1990, as it seems outdated compared to the modern 405 that succeeded it in the range in 1987. The 305 cultivates seriousness, classicism, and sobriety. A true Peugeot. But you probably don't know everything about this sedan that seems so discreet. It hides behind it a whole bunch of prototypes and derivatives that unfortunately never saw the light of day. Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. It's true that everyone has more or less forgotten about the 305. And yet the study of this car took time, believe it or not. Because at the beginning, Peugeot had called on Pininfarina, and the first idea was to make a sedan much more upscale than the 304 it was supposed to replace. But the project was quickly forgotten due to lack of money, as it's often the case. At the same time, we can't say that the Proto was one of the most successful with this front face that somewhat reminds of the Renault 5. The acquisition of Citroën also disrupted Peugeot's plans to some extent. Because if the final 305 looks like the 604 aesthetically, it is closely derived from its predecessor, the 304, to limit costs as much as possible. So at the beginning of its career, it will take over the engines of the 304, namely the 1.4 liter of 74 horsepower and the 1.3 liter of 65 horsepower reliable, proven, but noisy engines. The 305 therefore appears in 1977, and in addition to the two gas engines, it will also receive a diesel engine, a 1.5 liter of 49 horsepower. Then in 1980, Peugeot releases the station wagon version and also presents a slightly more powerful version, finally the S version with a 1.5 liter of 89 horsepower. In 1982, the Phase 2 appears. It's a subtle restyling with the grille and headlights slightly tilted forward and smoother. On the other hand, with this Phase 2, the range is enriched. A slightly less sluggish new diesel is offered, 1.9 liter with 65 horsepower, but especially a GT1 which replaces the S version in the range with a new 1.6 liter engine and 94 horsepower and a slightly more sporty look, with TRX rims for a greater effect. Shortly after, the G2X is released, featuring elements from the 205 GTI including the speedometer, steering wheel, and 1.9 liter cylinder engine with 105 horsepower. And finally, the 305 gets a little wilder. And in a way, it's because of the 205 GTI that the 305 GTX will be born. Indeed, at that point, Peugeot's overall image starts to smell of sport again. The 505's upper range, including the TI, STI, GTI, and Turbo, boasts more powerful engines. At the bottom, the brand new 205 GTI sets the pace for the Lion's revival. All that remains is to energize the 305 to ride the current trend. And on this 305 GTX, we find stiffened suspensions, improved braking, a lowering of 8 millimeters. So, it still doesn't become a racehorse, especially since its 110 remains that of a car from the 70s. But notable improvement, however, the gearbox, which is finely well-spaced and allows you to take advantage of the engine's torque. Inside, don't look for the exuberance of its sister 205 GTI apart from the counters which come from it, and an identical steering wheel but branded GTX. No red, no flashy carpet, nothing but serious. On the other hand, the equipment is complete for the time with specific bucket seats and above all, a first for Peugeot, the remote centralized locking and unlocking of the four doors. Progress is beautiful. A slightly improved exterior decoration reminds the Quidam that there are more than 100 horses under the hood, and there's even a small black plastic spoiler on the trunk. 13S from the 80s. And finally, for large families, a station wagon version allows Dad to have fun, while maintaining a welcome loading capacity. And as an option, whether on the sedan or the station wagon, you could even treat yourself to nice little options, including an electric sunroof or even leather upholstery. Very classy. So, of course, its design is older than the 205 GTI, its base is less sporty, its decoration is less flashy. It's not a competitor of the 205 GTI, but when you see the price of a 205 GTI today, you might think it's time to fall back on second fiddles. Certainly less exciting, but not devoid of charm and just as deserving to be saved. And the 305 GTX will disappear from the catalog in 1987, just like many other versions of the 305, because of the arrival of the 405 the same year. And from that year on, there will only be base finishes left. Then only station wagons will be produced until 1990, where the 305 will go out after 13 years of good and loyal service. In any case, for a car as ordinary and classic as you could wish, the 305 has quietly but surely established itself on the market, since in all 1.6 million copies will have been sold, which is quite good. Not bad, but the career of the 305 could have been quite different. As I told you in the introduction, behind this discreet sedan hid a multitude of prototypes that were studied for commercialization, but which never came out. First of all, let's talk about the 305 V6 Rally. In 1980, so it's been 3 years since the 305 has been on the market, but soon 10 years since the 504 have been racing in rallies. It's about time to rejuvenate all this and propose a rally car that impresses, more modern than the aging 504. And at the same time, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile announces the birth of Group B for 1982. As a reminder, the idea of Group B was to have power monsters derived from production vehicles compete in rallies. And for a car to be approved for Group B, there also had to be 200 copies for the general public, and therefore approved for the road. And at that time, Peugeot was not yet in the plans of the 205 Turbo 16. No, the idea at that time from Peugeot was to take the 305, put a big engine in it, and make it race in Group B rally to re-energize the image of Peugeot. No sooner said than done. The engineers get to work on the 305. On the menu, body-built bodywork. But not only that, because when it comes to rallying, propulsion or all-wheel drive is still better than front-wheel drive. So the men from the Lion modify the 305, turning the sedan into a rear-wheel drive. But that's not all. Under the hood, there will be a 2.5-liter V6 PRV with 24 valves and 205 horsepower. Suddenly, Dad's Wise 305 doesn't quite taste the same. The project will be carried out from 80 to 81 and will be on the verge of materializing. Juliez was even called upon to design the limited series of 200 road-approved copies. A full-scale model was made and presented in a superb white livery with blue and yellow stripes. Funny association, well, except for the fans of ASM, of course. Unfortunately or fortunately, the project did not come to fruition as the successor was coming in the form of the 205. And it was she who would now carry the torch of the Lion in rally. The 305 V6 will be forgotten, but it will help design the 205 Turbo 16s. And opposite to the 305 V6, there was a prototype, the 305 Vera. Nothing to do with Scooby-Doo, Vera meant economical vehicle of applied research. In 1980, the Vera Zero, one prototype will see the light of day, the goal being to reduce consumption to a minimum. The aerodynamics were therefore reworked, which will allow the CX to be 0.32 against 0.44 for the basic 305. The weight will also be reduced from 925 to 740 kilograms. A smaller gasoline engine derived from the Peugeot 104 will be installed. And all this is allowed to reduce the consumption by 26%, with 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers at 90 kilometers per hour, 6.5 liters at 120 kilometers per hour, and 7 liters per 100 kilometers in the city. And in 1981, the Vera 2 will be presented, which was equipped with a small 1.4-liter turbo diesel with a top speed of 158 kilometers per hour, but above all, an average consumption of 3.5 liters. And it was still quite an achievement, and that was 40 years ago. Let's then talk about a version that is perhaps even less known, so little known that in fact I couldn't find any photos of the prototypes, since there were 2 prototypes developed by D'Angel in 1985. D'Angel, as you've understood, a 305 with all-wheel drive. So don't think that the idea behind this was to offer a smaller alternative to the 505 D'Angel for off-roading. No, the idea was to compete with the Audi Quattro. Imagine the Peugeot engineers coming to work Monday at 8 a.m. declaring, We've decided to halt everything and compete with the Audi Quattro using our 305. Are you guys up for it? Let's call Dangel. As you might suspect, Dangel's 305 will never be released. But I didn't finish. I still have more of the 305 prototype to show you. Prototypes that will focus only on the bodywork, and I can tell you there were some very beautiful ones. And the 305 could have been very beautiful. Already the 305 was also designed in a fastback variant with a hatchback. The idea was to create an additional silhouette without spending too much money. It could have rivaled the Renault 30 or even the Simca, 1308. But that's not all. Here's the cut version imagined by the designers under the direction of Gerard Welter. They also imagined a two-body version, more typical of the 80s, with two small lights that would appear on the 205. Here's another one, perhaps the most surprising, and which is not without reminding of a certain AMC Pacer. We also did not get the station wagon versions, but let's not forget that at the time Peugeot was still extremely financially unstable, so they had to bet on rational things. And you tell me in the comments which body style would you have liked Peugeot to officially release for us. Thank you all for watching this new video. Don't hesitate to join me on my Instagram, Robin4UpVO, or on my secondary channel, Octane, where you will find a 3 to 4 minute video every day depending on my mood and which summarizes the car news more or less objectively. You will find all the links in the description in the first pinned comment under the video as usual. Don't forget to also subscribe. It's free and it helps support the channel. Thank you all. See you very soon in the next video.